India's maritime export network operates on a massive physical scale, moving millions of tons of cargo across global shipping lanes every year. That physical throughput recently translated into an all-time financial peak, with India's marine product exports reaching roughly $8.45 billion. But this chart reveals a severe lack of diversification beneath that record number. India's export profile relies heavily on a single product, frozen shrimp, accounting for over 2/3 of all earnings, with much of that volume centralized on the United States. This concentration became a liability when the U.S. enacted punitive tariff regimes on Indian exporters, erecting a trade wall of up to 58% duties. Competing nations like Ecuador and Indonesia face tariffs between 13% and 18%. Squeezed by this price disadvantage, Indian export volumes to the U.S. dropped by 19.8%. The current model relies on pumping raw commodities into a single high-tariff market. The data proves this framework hits a ceiling that makes further growth under the current structure impossible. In response to this shock, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal issued a new mandate for the sector. The government has set a target to expand seafood exports from $8.5 billion to $30 billion within the next 5 years. Bridging a $21.5 billion gap demands geometric expansion into new global regions, moving past existing quotas on established routes. To hit that target, the industry must dismantle its current export monoculture and rebuild its logistics network to support a wider range of processed products. The U.S. tariff shock triggered an immediate geographic pivot for Indian exporters. This flow model visualizes the reallocation of trade moving away from the United States in the early months of fiscal year 2026. In the first 5 months of the fiscal year, non-U.S. markets absorbed 86% of the country's incremental export value. Value shipped to China rose by 22.7%. The European Union market grew by 37.9%, and Southeast Asia saw an increase of 36.1%. Vietnam and Belgium emerged as unique nodes in this data sprint. Both nations doubled their import values, functioning as re-export and processing hubs for Indian goods. By forcing exporters to find alternative buyers, the U.S. tariffs de-risked India's export geography, turning a localized concentration into a diversified global network. Geographic diversification alone cannot bridge the $21.5 billion gap. The product itself must be upgraded. Minister of Food Processing Industries Chirag Paswan directed the sector to shift its output from produce to product. Formal export potential studies echo this. Exporters must transition away from selling raw frozen commodities and move toward branded, value-added goods. The economics are specific. Value-added processing creates higher margins. Those margins provide the financial buffer needed to absorb global freight costs and tariff friction. This matrix plots volume against value-added goods. The profitable upper quadrant is blocked by non-tariff measures, or NTMs, enforced by high-margin markets. To clear them, exporters must prove compliance with quality standards, sustainability, and end-to-end traceability. Meeting these standards requires physical discipline on the factory floor, utilizing controlled, sanitary processing environments. Hitting the $30 billion target relies on upgrading domestic processing capabilities to clear these specific global barriers. Supplying a global network of value-added exports requires a large increase in raw material extraction back in domestic waters. India's primary untapped resource is its exclusive economic zone, spanning 2 million square kilometers of ocean. This map highlights the depth of that resource. Niti Aayog estimates this deep-sea zone holds an unexploited potential yield of over 7 million tons. However, the current supply chain suffers a friction point. Over 20% of the national catch is lost after the harvest before it even reaches a processing facility. The government designed the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, or PMMSY, as a capital engine to fix this physical bottleneck. The scheme deploys 20,000 crore rupees into infrastructure nodes, funding modernized fishing harbors, cold storage networks, and recirculatory aquaculture systems. This infrastructure prevents waste and maintains the quality control data required for international NTM compliance. The PMMSY capital injection provides the physical foundation necessary to make the shift from bulk volume to high value possible. Generating higher yields and upgrading processing facilities yields little return if the final product still faces heavy border taxes abroad. To solve this, India finalized 9 free trade agreements with developed nations over the last 3 years. These FTAs act as a counterweight to the U.S. tariffs, guaranteeing greater market access and lowering financial barriers in alternative regions. Industrial-scale export hubs are now primed to utilize these newly opened low-tariff trade routes. Free trade agreements serve as the final catalyst, transforming domestic capacity upgrades into realized international revenue. Geographic diversification, value-added processing, and domestic infrastructure upgrades now operate together. This integrated throughput model shows raw catch from the EEZ flowing through new PMMSY infrastructure, clearing NTM quality gates, and routing through FTA networks to global markets. This evolution was catalyzed by the U.S. tariff shock, forcing an overly reliant industry to diversify. With this supply chain operational, the $30 billion target moves from political rhetoric to an achievable result of higher volume and better margins. By treating external trade pressure as a catalyst for domestic infrastructure evolution, India is building a more resilient and lucrative blue economy.